Some of you may remember a movie that caused quite a stir back in the 1970s called The Exorcist. The movie was set at Georgetown University. The movie was written as a novel in 1971 by a Georgetown alumnus, William Peter Blatty. It was made into a movie in 1973. It was based on events that were reportedly true. The story of a child who had been brought to Georgetown in 1949 because of its reputation as a medical center and because of the community of priests who lived on campus. That child was a 14-year-old boy named Roland Doe, and he was brought there because it was believed that he suffered from demonic possession. In the movie, it's a 12-year-old girl who is demon-possessed. We know she's possessed by those impure spirits because she displays strange and aggressive behaviors after playing with a Ouija board. She is constantly swearing. She displays abnormal strength. These, we learn, are early symptoms of demonic possession. The movie details this girl's mother's desperate attempts to win back her child through an exorcism conducted by two of the priests on campus, and the results are horrific. If you haven't seen it, before you run home and download it for family viewing, I have to tell you that The Exorcist was named the scariest film of all time by Entertainment Weekly in 1999, by Movies.com in 2010, by viewers of AMC in 2006, and by the editors of Time Out in 2014. That says to me I don't want to run home and watch it right away. Perhaps luckily for us, I don't know, the scene in today's text from the Gospel of Mark is somewhat less dramatic than that's portrayed in the movie. But Jesus and his disciples run into a demon possession nonetheless. They're in Capernaum. It's the Sabbath. Jesus is teaching in the synagogue. The people are amazed at his teaching. Mark tells us they're amazed because he taught as one who had authority, not as the teachers of the law. This is why people flocked to hear him. They knew when he spoke that it was something important. We hear about E.F. Hutton. Jesus was like that, or better. Christ had barely begun his teaching on this particular day, however, when a man in the synagogue began to cry out. And the interesting thing is that he spoke in the first person plural. What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? And then he reverts to the first person singular. I know who you are, the Holy One of God. Mark explains to us that this man who was crying out was possessed by an impure spirit. We really don't know what it is that the New Testament is talking about when it speaks of casting out evil spirits. Perhaps it's referring to mental and emotional illness. Would physical problems with unusual manifestations such as epilepsy have been considered demonic in a pre-scientific world? Most scholars are convinced that this is the nature of so-called demon possession in the scriptures. Does that mean that we should forget these stories? That we should consign them to modern medicine, modern psychiatry? I would say absolutely not. Jesus still casts out demons, whether they're physical, emotional, or spiritual. Mark tells us that Jesus said sternly, "Be quiet, come out of him." And the impure spirit shook the man violently and came out of him as with a shriek. Now, this man, who formerly had an impure spirit, is now sitting there calm and composed, listening with all the others to Jesus' teachings. The people are all so amazed, and they ask themselves, what is this? A new teaching with authority. He even gives orders to impure spirits, and they obey him. Picture the excitement. People reaching for their smartphones, texting their friends over the whole region of Galilee. You won't believe what happened at church this morning. Well, they probably didn't communicate their excitement exactly like that. But wouldn't it be wonderful if when something exciting happened in worship, we would do that and tell our friends? It's okay with me. I hope that if something in church does excite you, the music moves you, if the children do something enjoyable in the worship service, whatever it may be, that you will say something about it to your friends. You will talk to them on Facebook or Twitter or face-to-face. Share the joy. That said, the only social media that people in that first century time had was person to person. And yet Mark tells us that the word spread all over the region. Here's a man who teaches with authority, and he has power over the demons as well. Not a bad resume. Power over evil. Dr. M. Scott Peck has shared with us the insight that evil is the word live backwards. So evil, in the sense that Dr. Peck shares, is the exact opposite of the way that God intends us to live. Think about that. Any study of human history demonstrates far too clearly that evil has been a very destructive power in our world. We only need to sit down and read the paper, or to watch the news, or pay attention to the radio, or look on the internet, to see the brokenness of our world, to see the disconnecting of the original vision of shalom that God has for all of creation. The church does not deny that evil exists. We must even admit that at times it has been caught, the church has been caught in the web of evil itself. And yet the idea of casting out an evil spirit sounds perhaps too much like superstition to many of us. It would be easier to relegate that to the mindset of the pre-scientific world. And it may be because we have been exposed to so much human evil in our own time. William Barclay tells about a traveler in Soviet Georgia in the days before the Second World War. She was taken to see a very humble old woman in a little cottage. The old peasant woman asked her if she was going to Moscow, and the traveler said yes, she was. The woman said, then would you mind delivering a parcel of homemade toffee to my son? He can't get anything like it in Moscow. Her son's name? Joseph Stalin. Same Stalin who is said to have murdered millions of his own people. Beloved by his mother, who cared for him. Confronted with people whom we may see as monsters like Stalin or Adolf Hitler, who seem on the surface in every respect like normal human beings, but who found it possible to rationalize barbaric human behavior. And many others in our own time. We don't necessarily need to look behind the bush to find demonic spirits. The human face of evil is quite enough. The ever-persistent problem of evil has always been difficult for human thought to explain. It is exhausting. Evil can evaporate hope quicker than anything else I know on the human scene. I can really resonate with Dr. Edward Steinley, who was a teacher at Union Theological Seminary in New York City. He said, "The thing that always keeps bringing me back to the Bible is its ability to tell it like it is." Some people believe it only tells them like it was, so they no longer read it, but let it gather dust on coffee tables. This book talks about evil, demons, and angels. Somehow, to them, it is far removed from jobs and paychecks and cocktail parties and space travel and nuclear power. However, Dr. Steinley pointed out, where would you find a more down-to-earth picture of the age-old problem of passing the buck of responsibility for our sinful behavior? You want religious bigotry? Look at Jonah, God's reluctant prophet. What about the farmer who spends all his time planting good seed, works hard to cultivate a good crop, only to discover that something is at work in his field trying to destroy it? Isn't that an accurate description of life? There's something always spoiling things. Is it not true that everywhere you find goodness in life, you find evil? Thank you, Dr. Steinley. Bishop Herbert Welch was a very well-known bishop from the United Methodist Church, and he lived to be more than 100 years old. From the vantage point of his 100th birthday, he surveyed the world that he had known longer than most of us know it, and called it a mixed world. Side by side with the beautiful is the weird, the grotesque, even the ugly. He wrote, there are fertile plains to be cultivated and mines to be discovered, but there are also swamps and deserts. There are mountains of refuge and life-giving breezes, but also hurricanes, floods and drought, volcanoes and earthquakes which rend and devastate. There are birds of song and birds of prey. The trouble with weeds is that they do not seem to understand that they are not welcome. They come uninvited. No good farmer wants them in his wheat field, but there they are nonetheless. The farmer would not mind them quite so much if they would stay outside the fence, where they belong. If they would stay along the road, that would be great. But they're not content to do that. They insist on invading the field, and the same is true about life. Evil would not be a problem for us if we could always count on it staying where it belongs, or where we think it belongs. But it has a way of getting all tangled up with the good in life. We expect evil to be present in some neighborhoods, but not ours. We could name those neighborhoods if you asked us to, but lo and behold, it's present in our own area, in our own neighborhoods, in our own homes. We expect evil to show up in people who are different from us. Sometimes it shows up in our own inner circle. And there are times when all of us reach the breaking point. At those times, we desperately need a friend. That, my friends, is one reason why the church family is so important. For many of us, this is where we turn with our hurts and find that friend that we so desperately need at that time. And our relationship with God is so critical to that healing process. Isn't it good to know that there is one who always believes in us? One who says to us, you are created in my image. You can make it. I will be with you. Only Christ can cast out an impure spirit. And he does that by filling us so full of the love of God that there is no room for any other spirit to torture us. Are you afraid? Angry? Do you feel unloved? Unnoticed? Open your heart to God and let God create a new heart and a new spirit within you. And there will be no room for the evil. Jesus was teaching in a synagogue in Capernaum when a man in the grip of an evil spirit began shouting at him. We don't know the nature of that evil spirit, but we know that Jesus delivered that man. We don't know whether that man had a family, but we can imagine. We can see him returning home in his right mind with a serene look on his face. His wife greets him at the door. His children peer suspiciously from behind their mother's apron. He gently calls them out and lifts them into his arms and turns to his wife and says softly, I'm back. Thanks be to God.